Welcome back to another edition of Animal General with me, your host, Dr. Mike Hutchinson. In today's video cast, I'm going to talk about something that a lot of you are calling our clinic about, and you're hearing about on national TV and radio, is this pet food recall because of vitamin D toxicity. And vitamin D, obviously, we all know that vitamin D is good for us. It's certainly good for our animals too. And the commercial pet food manufacturers do put that into the food so that our dogs get supposedly an adequate level of vitamin D. But what we're finding out, maybe it's not adequate. But in this particular recall, I'm going to talk to you about why too much vitamin D would be bad. And we'll get to that in just a second. Before I get into the discussion about too much vitamin D, I want to let everybody know, if you want to know if the pet food you're feeding to your cat and dog is on a recall list, go to the FDA.gov website and type in the search engine, pet food recalls. You'll find all the current recalls and the reasons why at that site. That makes this timely so that if you happen to be hearing about this next year, maybe you're listening to one of my old podcasts or videocasts, you'll find out what's current, and you won't have to worry about something I'm talking about. So first of all, vitamin D, we know that it's very good for us, and recently a lot of attention has been made towards vitamin D. We should be taking more vitamin D is what most of the doctors are recommending now. Why is that? Well, vitamin D, insufficiency of vitamin D. If you don't get enough vitamin D, what happens? Well, we can get things where they're finding that there's higher incidence of cancer with people with low vitamin D. Higher mortality rates in the hospitals. This is for animals too. What that means is more people that die in hospitals are found to have low vitamin D levels. So we also have kidney disease if we have low levels. We have things like, in cats, feline tooth resorption. A lot of people don't realize that cats get a lot of painful teeth because their gums and their teeth start to reabsorb. And when that happens, they're finding a lot of these cats have low vitamin D levels. Things like atopy or atypical dermatitis. When a dog's itching like crazy or a cat's itching like crazy, they're allergic to everything under the sun. Sometimes checking that vitamin D level might be a wise thing to do, because then we can supplement them and get them back up to normal levels and perhaps help that condition. There are things that the parathyroid hormone, vitamin D, is a very important precursor to calcium metabolism. There's one of the precursors to actually calcitrol. Calcitrol is a powerful steroid or hormone that helps regulate calcium and phosphorus metabolism inside the body. That's important in almost every function of our body, including our immune function. So if you don't have low levels of vitamin D, you can end up with lots of diseases that perhaps we can help. And today it's so easy for us veterinarians to test vitamin D. We can take a couple drops of blood, put it on a card, literally like you would for a DNA test, send it out, and we can get an accurate vitamin D level and learn where to supplement them. We're learning a lot about where the normal levels should be. And far too often with the commercial diets, we're finding that a lot of animals are running low or low normal, and maybe we can help them by bumping that up. So now the pet food recalls. You're hearing a lot of main manufacturers like Hills and Nutra Pet Foods and things like that recently had trouble with vitamin D. Well, what happens, a lot of these pet food manufacturers use what we call a common kitchen. The kitchen has their unique recipe and makes their unique food, but they might make foods for a lot of different companies. That's why you always see this wide breadth all of a sudden if there's a vitamin D issue where they do a voluntary recall and saying we're finding 70 times or 100 times the normal vitamin D levels in our food. It's affecting a lot of foods because it comes from that kitchen. And that kitchen probably got a source that might have been tainted or had too much vitamin D, and now they used it in all those recipes. And so multiple food companies at the same time have these recalls. It's good that they test. It's good that they do voluntary recalls. And it's good that the FDA keeps us informed about those types of things. Now, too much vitamin D is a horrible thing. It can cause kidney disease. Remember, it's a very important precursor for calcium. So one of the things that happens is the calcium goes real high in the bloodstream, and high calcium can cause a lot of issues in the kidney. It can even start lining intestines and arteries with mineralization, which means they get hard and less elastic, and it can become very, very bad for a pet. And it can cause lifelong issues, even death. Typically, though, we don't see dogs dying from vitamin D overdose. We see them getting disease from it. They start drinking excessively. They start vomiting. They start getting weak. Classic signs of these different diseases that I talked about. So when you hear about this vitamin D recall, take it serious. Of course, check to see if your pet food's on the list. Maybe you got one of the lots that's affected, and then I would take that back to where you bought it from and get reimbursed. If you're concerned because your pet's sick, see your veterinarian. Certainly, we can all do tests to find out if there's any issues. Another interesting side note, some of these rodent poisonings that you see outdoors, it used to be that the rodent poisons contain mostly anticoagulants or things that would cause bleeding inside the rats and the mice, and they would go back to their den and it would kill them. Eventually, they'd bleed to death. Well, and we could treat that if that happened to get into a dog or a cat. But recently, they started using vitamin D or cholecalciferol, which is like vitamin D, and it causes these high vitamin D levels, which can cause permanent damage in our pets. So even things like rat poison can cause vitamin D toxicosis, and it just happens to be an aside I wanted to share with you. So check to see if your food's on that list, FDA.gov. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, don't just live and let live, but live and help live.